Now, as I said earlier, Miyazaki calls Cagliostro, Nausicaa, Laputa, Totoro a rectangle. So, what that means is that he did everything he wanted to do. He tried different approaches for each of those 4 works, so there was nothing left to do when he was done. So he said, after I finished the 4 works, I no longer intended to direct anime. I was fed up with it, and I wanted to go back to the position of animator. He said this many times here and there, but accordingly, when he completed Nausicaa, he requested, "Let me become an animator again ASAP." But pretty much no one who moved up from animator to director then went back down. For example, Yoshikazu Yasuhiko, the character designer of Gundam, started out as an animator, then became a character designer, then a director. That's the career path for almost all animators. Some directors sometimes help others out with drawings, but that's it. But when Nausicaa was completed, people told Miyazaki, "So isn't Nausicaa 2 coming up next?" Despite their expectations, Miyazaki went to Suzuki and yelled. He was emotional rather than mad. He pleaded, "I can't stand losing more friends." Because when an animator becomes a director, they gradually get left out by their peer animators, because the director's job is to say, "This is good" or "This is bad" to their drawings. Miyazaki thought that's the role of an administrator, whom we, the animators, all used to hate when we belonged to Toei Animation. It's not what we should do to each other. He knew his fellow animators understood his position because they were a team, but he also understood how animators always found directors a bit annoying. That's why Miyazaki said, "I've lost all of my friends through making Nausicaa. That's why I don't want to be a director ever again. Do you understand how I feel, Suzuki-san?" Previously, Miyazaki also cried to Takahata, "Takahata-san, please let me help you with your current project as an animator." Takahata was surprised and replied, "What? You finally became a director and now you want to become an animator again?" But then he thought, "Oh wait, if Miyazaki comes back to my team, that'll be awesome." So he gave him tons of drawing work for Anne of Green Gables, which he was working on back then, and said, "Okay, here you go." Miyazaki was like, "Gee, now I'm an animator again. I can't be happier. I'm never gonna direct again." Then he began drawing at a furious speed. And before the day was over, he started picking on the drawings of his colleague who was sitting next to him and went, "That's wrong, give that to me," and started redoing them like crazy. So he left Anne of Green Gables just like that and started directing the Castle of Cagliostro. It sounds like a joke, like a comedy skit by Tokyo 03. That's the kind of man Hayao Miyazaki is. He's got such big mood swings. So, if he thinks he can do something, he tries to do it all. But if he doesn't, then he goes, "I'm so useless," and he doesn't just think like that, but also acts upon it. A person like that is described as an instantaneous water heater in Japan. Someone who loses temper quickly and cools down just as fast. But in the case of Miyazaki, he doesn't just lose his temper, but instantly explodes like a nuclear reaction. Anyway, back to the main topic. He said these 4 works were something he'd always wanted to make, but now, having completed them, he no longer had anything he wanted to do. At least, that's what he was thinking around this time. So he was actually going to let someone else make Kiki's delivery service. That's how accomplished he felt after completing Laputa. And I think that was his honest opinion. Except for Kiki's delivery service, which from halfway he had to take over in directing. It was only 4 years after he completed Totoro that he finally decided to make another film, Porco Rosso. For 4 years, he had nothing that he really wanted to express. So, I think he was pretty serious about saying, "I'm done. I've completed the 4 corners of the rectangle." Then, what kind of movie is Laputa? I think it's a perfect version of the Castle of Cagliostro. An earnest princess escapes a villain by herself, and a man saves her. The only difference is that Pazu saves her instead of Rupan. But either way, a man saves her. But the bad guys come to get her back and steal her. Then the main character gives her up momentarily. Which you can see in scenes like where Rupan doesn't know that Clarice was drug dosed and thinks, oh well, it can't be helped. Or Pazu says, Sheeta told me to forget about Laputa, and Dola scolds her. But afterwards, they both fight together with their colleagues, and at the end, they discover a ruin of ancient metropolis, which would be submerged metropolis from the Roman Empire, for the castle of Cagliostro, and a huge castle in the sky for Laputa. So, they resemble each other so closely in terms of their plots. And that's because Miyazaki had always wanted to make something similar to a British classic children's literature called Treasure Island by Stevenson. United Kingdom is like the birthplace of children's literature, and Treasure Island is the classic of classics. All works by Miyazaki are basically adaptations of the main plot of Treasure Island. So, it'll be easier to understand his works if you compare them to Treasure Island and think like, so, who would be the equivalent of Captain Silver in this work? But, at the same time, Miyazaki had his strong anti-feeling against works like Mobile Suit Gundam, Space Battleship Yamato, and his own work, The Castle of Cagliostro. Because, according to Miyazaki, they all set elites as main characters. Each of them has special skills. For example, Rupan is a genius thief. But for Miyazaki, even Amuro, the main character of Gundam, is a subject of criticism. We'd think that an ordinary boy like Amuro broke the image of a typical noble and athletic main character in Japanese anime. But Gundam appeared to Miyazaki as an anime where all the main character does is act cool while receiving help from a machine, like the donkey in the lion skin. So, Laputa to Miyazaki was an antithesis to Gundam or Rupan. However, this troubled him later on. He wrote on the proposal, I want to make it a story about an ordinary boy. But then he later realized that having an ordinary boy as the main character wouldn't give him any plot. I mean, the villain called Colonel Muska bosses his military around and works for the Information Bureau of the government, and Dola, his opponent, is a super strong pirate lady. Then here comes a 12 to 13-year-old boy who just tries hard to save the girl. How would he win? Miyazaki went, what am I gonna do now? I thought, then, why did you say such a thing in the first place? Above all, when Miyazaki wrote the first draft and thought, I think this is good, and showed it to Suzuki and Takahata, they scolded him. They said, what's this? You made Muska the main character. Sure, I see you put a little boy called Pazu as the main character. This won't make a blood-tingling anime movie like our slogan says, but a glory and failure of young Muska. A boy who believed in the legend of Laputa, which he had heard from his parents, and thought, one day, I'm gonna rebuild the civilization of the people of Laputa. He tries so hard to find and kidnap a girl who succeeds Laputa's imperial bloodline. The girl hates him, so he tries to use words to attract her. But another young boy steals her. He goes through crap until he finally thinks he gets the glory. Then at the very end, the girl betrays him, so he fails and loses everything. What a good story about Muska. But is that what you want? Miyazaki said, no! I mean, that original plot is pretty interesting, isn't it?